Dr. Rena Malik, if somebody was to come up to you in the street, having watched your videos online, and they were a follower of the content you've produced over the last couple of years, if you had to guess the question they would ask you, because it's probably the most frequent, popular question you get asked, what do you think they would say?
They would say, what can I be doing right now to improve my sex life?
Who would be asking you that question, and why do you think they'd be asking it?
I think everyone can agree that sex is something we enjoy. It's something that's important that we want to have, right? And there is a desire to have good sex or feel like maybe you're missing out on something that could be even better. So how can you have the best sex possible? Because you hear all these people talking about amazing sex in the media. You might see it on pornography. You might feel like this is something amazing. Why am I not having that? I want that, right?
So on that point, you said it's obvious that it's important. I think it appears to be increasingly not obvious that it's important. Because when you look at some of these stats, and I'll throw this graph that I found here up on screen, and it shows that people are becoming more sexless, especially young adults between 18 and 30. This graph is pretty stark.
Mm-hmm. Think about 50 years ago. There was no cell phones. There might be some TV programs, but there was ads in between TV programs. And there was only certain TV shows you could watch at a certain time that you enjoyed, and then there was nothing to watch. There was no email. So you went to work and you came home, and there was really not a lot of communication between you and your coworkers or your job. They made dinner with their family, they hung out, and then maybe they watched a program or two, and then they lied down in bed. They didn't have a phone to scroll on. They didn't have anything to keep them up. And so then they were like next to their partner, and maybe they're talking, maybe they're cuddling. And so there was more like opportunity and space for sex, right? It was a thing that you did for enjoyment, for pleasure, for fun. Now we have all these distractions that keep our mind away from sex. In order to enjoy sex, you need to have space for it, to be able to enjoy your partner and feel like you want that, right? And now we're sort of there's not as much room for it. That's one. Two is younger people, how are they dating, right? How are they meeting each other? They're meeting each other through apps, through DMs. And so they're not actually like really having these deep, meaningful connections. There's a big hookup culture. There's a big like fling culture. And imagine first-time sex for most people is not great. You don't know your partner. You don't know what they like. And you may not be able to express what you like. You've never taught how to talk about sex, right? So you don't know how to say like, hey, I like it like this. And you may be self-conscious because it's your first time. So you have like mediocre sex or bad sex. And you're like, well, I don't really want that. And there's just no like follow through, right? There's not a lot of education on what sex should look like. The only education people are getting are from often erotic films. And so they're seeing sex that's not real, that's curated, and they're trying to emulate that. And that's not pleasurable for most people. And younger people these days are actually having a rise in more we call rough sex. So choking has become very, very common as like they call choking almost like vanilla sex. So young people, if you look at data, like 60% of women and I think it's 20% of men have been choked during sex of that age group, like college age group. And of those people who get choked, 20% have been choked 25 times or more. Now, I think it's fine if you're into that, but I can't imagine that many people are into choking. And there's data to support that. So when you look at qualitative data, this is by Debbie Herbenik, she's a sex researcher, and she did qualitative research, and she asked people, like, what is it like? Do you enjoy being choked? Tell us about it, right? Women were like, yeah, it's okay. Sometimes I'm scared because my partner is big and strong and I'm, smaller and they have big hands. Sometimes it's fine and sometimes I don't really care for it, but like it's just a part of sex. It's just as normal as kissing, for example. And so if you're having sex and you're doing things just because you think that's what your partner wants or what it should look like, and you're not enjoying it, well, that's not going to be sex that you want to have.
That point you said about the lifestyles we lead and how that might be impacting our sex lives, I thought was really interesting because we don't talk enough about this. But when you look at some of the data on this demographic, people 30 and below, around that age, the extreme outliers are spending 8 to 10 hours on their phones, on social media and on the internet. And roughly about 15 to 20% of young people describe their usage as almost constant, effectively scrolling during all waking hours, while they're eating, while they're in the bathroom and before they go to sleep. So I was wondering from a dopamine perspective, if there's correlation between these like dopamigenic activities that are now like hijacking our lives, whether it's short form videos on social media, whether it's pornography or food, whether it's having an impact on what then happens in the bedroom and our performance in the bedroom.
If you think about what you need to have good sex, is you need to be sort of in the mind space for sex. And if you're constantly like hijacked by all these other things, you're never like really getting in the mood, right? You're just like, oh, I'm going to be turned on when I see my partner and we're going to have sex and it's going to be over. And it's just really a mechanical thing at that point, right? You're just trying to get an orgasm. You're not actually like spending the time to enjoy and to experience that fully, because you're just so like, your brain is always doing something else, right? Because people are constantly scrolling, like every 60 seconds there's a new video, there's something else. And so it's really hard to focus. And so that can translate to the bedroom where you're having sex, but your brain is somewhere else, thinking about something else you saw or something you have to do or something you want to see or something you want to look up, whatever it is, but you're not really there in the moment. You're just going through the motions. And so I think that's really where the challenge is that people are becoming increasingly distractible.
I find it really hard, I'm going to be honest, to have sex if I've had like a really, really busy day or if I'm really, really thinking about something.
Yeah.
I almost have to like intentionally create quite a lot of space.
Exactly.
In order to be able to be in the mood.
Yeah, be aroused, right? It takes like time and energy. I think I appreciate you for saying that, because a lot of people think that men are just ready to go at any moment.
Yeah.
And that's not fair, right? Because everyone needs time to be aroused. It's not just instant for everybody, especially when you have a lot of work stress or life stress or other things going on. It's actually like you have to make time and space for it.
Yeah, because as a man, you've got to get an erection. And I always think that an erection is a consequence, usually, especially when it comes to sex. And I'm not talking about morning glories here, but an erection is a consequence of like a story. Mm-hmm. You use the word aroused. Mm-hmm. There's like a story in my head which makes me go, oh, that's kind of hot.
Yeah. You need something. You need some stimuli, right? You need to think about something, see something, smell something, feel something, right? You need to just be together and sort of allow yourselves to be intimate before that sort of desire and arousal come together.
And for me as well, it's not just touch. Like that doesn't necessarily, for me, it really is quite like a psychological thing. I was wondering if there's any data around this, or, I mean, just even anecdotally, like people get aroused in very, very different ways, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some people are very like visual. So they see their partner and they get aroused very quickly. Basically, when you get aroused, you need to be in a parasympathetic nervous system state. So in order to get an erection, you need to be in the state which is like rest and digest. So if you're stressed, if you're thinking about other things, if you're essentially on the go, you are not allowing your nervous system to calm down. And so for some people, that's a whole bunch of different things. Some people can switch more easily into that state. And some people need more of like, to feel either mentally stimulated, or they need to have some associations. Like it might be like they need a certain scent. They need to like relax their body. They need to like go take a bath, whatever it is. But some people need different things. And knowing what that is for your partner is super important, right? Because then you can incorporate that. Everything is scheduled in our lives, right? And then you're like, oh, but now sex is like the last thing on the schedule, right? And like, I don't even think about it. Like, oh, okay, now, yeah, maybe let's have sex. But it's like, if you actually make time to be intimate, allow yourself to be in that brain space, be together, that's when it can actually happen, especially when you've been in a long-term relationship. It doesn't come as easily, like spontaneously, which we call spontaneous desire. It comes more as a response to these other cues that allow you to feel desire and to feel aroused.
I also think, I was thinking about a previous relationship I had where on the days where I'd been like working very hard and I was like tired or stressed, or I'd been traveling and I was jet lagged, I think there was also, because I didn't see this person often, there was also an expectation that when I did see them, we were going to have sex. Mm-hmm. And that was very hard, because actually the expectation of it stressed me out more.
Yeah.
And that can happen, like if it becomes the elephant in the room, it can become a little bit heavy, which then is sort of counterproductive to
Absolutely.
Performance.
And this is, sort of a variation on performance anxiety. So when you feel like you have to perform on demand and maybe you're worried it might not happen, it creates this vicious loop, right? So you maybe have trouble with an erection, or maybe it's like I'm expected to have sex, but I really can't get there mentally. Whatever it is, now you're thinking about that, right? And then you're with your partner and you're like, oh my God, am I going to have trouble? You're not enjoying the pleasurable sensations or the visuals or like feeling each other. you are literally thinking in your own head about how you're going to respond. And then that anxiety makes it so that you can't get an erection or you can't be aroused. And so now you're like anxious and you're not focused. You're just almost spectating. You're just watching yourself have sex. You're not actually like in the moment. So then, you have a negative outcome because when you're stressed, your sympathetic nervous system is on, right? You can't really get an erection or you can't really get aroused. And so then you're like, oh man, now I've let my partner down. Now I haven't performed, which I hate that word, but like performed the way I should or I'm expected to. And now something's wrong with me. And now that just keeps going in a vicious cycle.
Have you spoken to people that have experienced this?
Absolutely.
It's common.
Very common. I tell people anytime you have problems in the bedroom, it stays with you.
So how do you break the cycle?
Yeah, so I tell people when you're with your partner, take the pressure off penetration. Just explore each other's body. Do what's called like sensate focus, like explore the rest of your body. Figure out other erogenous zones, other things that can turn you guys both on that don't involve erections and penetration. And then once you realize you're focused on that, you're really like exploring, enjoying, playing, you're having a good time, and you're not thinking about your erection. Now you'll notice, oh, the erection just comes, right? And then once you get to that point, then you can start even touching genitals, but still hold off on penetration. And then after you realized like the genitals are, it's always working the way I want it to, and I'm not thinking about it, I'm not stressed, then finally you can then introduce penetrative sex again. So it's just sort of like a gradated sort of slow advance into, having sex again, but now kind of focusing on being more present and mindful and enjoying those sensations.
I think a lot of people will be able to do that, but there's also a big contingent of people that just avoid sex.
Mm-hmm.
It's a sore subject in their relationship for whatever reason. Both partners don't know how to communicate. They haven't got the tools to talk about these kind of things openly and honestly. Do you see that a lot as well?
Absolutely. I mean,
what do you hear in this regard?
So I think it's really sad. I see people come in and they're like, I ask every patient, like, are you having sex? Why not? Right? Because sometimes they'll say no, and most doctors will be like, okay. But I always say, why not? Right? Why are you not having sex? Is it because you're having an issue? Is it because you're having pain? What's going on? Right? And oftentimes I'll hear from people that my partner's just not into it and I just sort of gave up. And we just don't have sex anymore. For me, that's a red flag because sex is a huge, important part of our lives. It is a way we connect with another human being. It's also telling that things are working really well. So when you have good sexual function, meaning you get an erection well, or you get aroused well, and you have a good orgasm, and everything feels good, that tells me that, hey, you've got great blood flow to your genitals, your nerves are working great, your hormones are sending signals, like all these things are good, right? But also, sex is more than just the act of sex. It also helps you live longer. So there's been a few studies looking at sex and longevity. And when you look at people who have sex once a week compared to people who have sex once a year, the difference in all-cause mortality is 49%. They live 49% longer than people who only have sex once a year.
49% longer?
Yeah.
Be right back. No, I'm joking.
But even if you're doing like less than once a week, but more than once a year, it still improves your longevity. There was actually an interesting study in 1997, I think it was, where they looked at the number of orgasms men had. Mm-hmm. And they found that men who had, for every 100 orgasms men had, they lived like 13% longer. They had a 13% increase in life expectancy. And so it was really interesting to me to just showing you that like this is not just an act of pleasure and fun. It is, obviously, but it's much more than that because people who are having sex clearly have better health. And this connection with people, I mean, loneliness is a big issue right now. The WHO made loneliness like an epidemic. So they've said that loneliness is as bad as having like 15 cigarettes. And so sex is a way to feel connected to another human being.
On that data, we're not saying that it's the sex itself that's causing people to live longer. I guess it's hard to establish causation in terms of...
Yeah, it's not necessarily sex, but they've looked at, like, they try to control for other things like age and comorbidities in all these studies. And it's also like sex is a cardiovascular workout, right? For many people, it's a cardiovascular workout. You are getting a physical activity with your partner. Mm-hmm. You are increasing your heart rate. You are doing these things that are also good for your body. Mm-hmm. And the fact that you're able to have sex, right, tells me a lot about it, right? You're able to hold a certain position. You're able to maintain this level of activity without getting short of breath, right? Like these are things that having sex, keeps you healthy to some degree.
If I want to make sure that I have great sex, what are some of the foundational things that I need to be thinking of in terms of my lifestyle?
Yeah, so there's 4 main pillars of sexual health. And I like to think of it like your sexual health is your house, and these pillars are the foundation. And if you don't have the foundation, it doesn't matter what else you do. You can try to do everything else to patch up your house, but it's always going to break again because the foundation's not there. So you've got fuel, and fuel is how you nourish your body. A lot of the data I'm going to talk about is about men because there's just a lot more data on men and sexual health. But that doesn't mean that the same things don't apply to women. There's just less robust data on it. So when you talk about fuel, the Mediterranean diet is the most studied diet. So including things like healthy fats like avocados, leafy greens, nuts, and we're going to talk about nuts in a little more detail. These things are super helpful. And obviously having lean proteins, having an abundance of fruits, which we're going to talk about as well. There's a study called the Health Professionals Follow-Up Study. There was 20,000 men. And they saw that men who adhered to a Mediterranean diet had a 22% lower risk of erectile dysfunction. So what specific things in that diet, right? People are always like, what are the superfoods I need to have? Almonds are great, but pistachios, they actually did a study on pistachios where they looked at 100 grams of pistachios. Guys ate 100 grams of pistachios every day, and they saw a decrease in erectile dysfunction.
So pistachio nuts will make my penis harder.
I mean, so I always say, like, I don't love to talk about superfoods because then people are like, oh, I just got to eat pistachios and it's all good, right?
Yeah.
It's part of a whole diet. But certainly having nuts because they have great omega-3s, they have healthy fats. These are the reasons that they really sort of improve diet. Fruit, anything that has sort of flavonoids, so like colorful fruit, like blueberries, citrus fruits, lycopene, which is red fruits, all of these things improve antioxidants and also have been shown to reduce the incidence of erectile dysfunction. So having stronger erections, specifically blueberries actually came out to have, I think, something around 20% also improvement in erectile function when you're eating blueberries regularly. So lots of, I think, things in the diet that can be helpful. Also, fiber is one that we don't talk about enough. When you eat fiber in your gut, it converts to short-chain fatty acids. These short-chain fatty acids then sort of have these endothelial protective mechanisms. They protect the blood vessels. They make them healthier. And so when your blood vessels are healthy, you get better metabolic health. So you get less diabetes, less high blood pressure, less high cholesterol. And all of these things together improve erectile function. So I think in making sure that you meet the criteria for fiber, which is 38 grams for men, 25 grams for women, is really, really important. And then obviously managing your calories in a maintenance, right? Because we don't want to gain weight because excess adipose tissue or excess fat also puts you at higher risk for erectile dysfunction and other sexual dysfunctions. Next, we have strength. All right. So there's strength where we think about cardiovascular and resistance exercise, but there's also pelvic floor strength. So we'll start with cardiovascular exercise. The one study that's quoted very often is 150 minutes of exercise, of cardiovascular exercise, moderate intensity. When you look at the improvement in erectile function scores, it is the same amount of improvement as you would see when you take a medication like Viagra. So literally, if you do 150 minutes a week, you are getting the same improvement as you could get with a medication, potentially. And so I tell people, like, look, if you don't want to take a pill, this is a great way to improve sexual function. Now you might say, okay, well, maybe you're listening and you have heart issues and you can't really do moderate intensity exercise. They actually looked at that too. So there was a group where they looked at men who had heart disease, and they weren't really able to do moderate intensity exercise. So they did like a 5-minute warm-up, they did 20 minutes of walking and 5 minutes of a cool down. And with this supervised protocol, they still improved erectile function by 70%. So it's all relative to where you're starting, but any sort of cardiovascular exercise that's above what you are capable, like what you're doing now, is going to improve sexual function, particularly erectile function, because it's going to improve blood flow to the genitals. It's going to improve blood flow to the penis. It's going to improve blood flow to the clitoris for women. So that's where cardiovascular exercise is so, so important. In terms of resistance exercise, now these little weights are probably not sufficient for doing much, especially for men, in terms of improving muscular health. But obviously obviously we're not going to bring like really heavy weights to the table here. So one, we know that resistance training is significantly correlated with testosterone. So when you do heavy resistance training of your large muscle groups, so like your lower extremities, your glutes, you're doing like Olympic deadlifts, squats, that sort of stuff, you actually see improvements in testosterone. Now, it's not going to be like you do it once and you get this sustained improvement, but continuous sort of regular resistance exercise improves testosterone. There's also data that shows that when men do resistance exercise to maintain muscle mass, so we know that muscle mass decreases about 7% every decade of life after around 40. When you maintain it through resistance exercise, they're 3 times less likely to have erectile dysfunction.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so they maintain erectile function, they maintain sexual desire, they maintain satisfaction with sex.